Whether you're upgrading your current PC or building a new one from scratch, CPU cooling shouldn't be an afterthought. And with a massive number of options, it can be a little overwhelming. That's where I come in. Today, I'll be looking at 4 CPU air coolers, each costing under $30 US. We'll check out things such as performance, noise, build quality, ease of installation, and of course, value. So get comfy and pay attention, because this one's full of useful info you won't want to miss. Let's get one thing straight. Everyone, and I mean everyone, yes, this means you too, needs cooling for their CPU. I know what you're thinking, some CPUs come with a cooling solution already. I don't recommend anyone use those, especially not after you see these coolers I've lined up today in action. Why don't I show you what I've got? The first one up is the Phanteks Polar ST4-120. It's a single tower air cooler with a 120mm addressable RGB fan that's got a speed range of 400 to 2000 RPM. There are 4 6mm copper heat pipes with an aluminum fin stack, and the top is flat black for a clean look. The heatsink dimensions are 120 by 50 by 154.5 millimeters. That's the full height of this cooler, by the way, in case you're trying to see if this fits in your case at home. The ST4 comes with an accessory box containing a big bag with smaller ones inside, labeled to easily find the hardware you need. They also give you an instruction paper with pictures for installation. This is the cheapest cooler in today's lineup, coming in at $19.99. The warranty that Phanteks gives you for this cooler is 5 years. Next on the list is from ID Cooling, and it's their Frozn A410 SE. It's another single tower air cooler that's got a 120mm fan, but no RGB. It has the same 4 6mm heat pipes with direct contact to the CPU. And it's got a decorative black plastic cap on top of the cooler. The A410 also uses a box for its included accessories, but I've never seen something like this. It's a small plastic case with cutouts for the screws and risers. Pretty clever if you ask me. The cooler dimensions are 128 by 76 by 152 millimeters. It's a little shorter than the ST4, but not by much. There's a small instruction guide included, but mine was for the X24 Duet, whatever that is, and if you follow them, it's not correct. Luckily, we have the internet, and their website has hardware diagrams I was able to use to figure out the orientation. The 120mm fan runs from 300 to 1800 RPM, and has rubber pads on the corners for vibration. The A410 SE comes in at $24.99 and includes a 3-year warranty. This next cooler might be a fan favorite, and it's the ThermalRight Burst Assassin 120 Evo Dark. ThermalRight holds 5 of the top 10 slots for best sellers in CPU cooling fans over on Amazon. And it's no wonder. They're cheap, look great, and provide excellent cooling performance, as you'll see in a second. The Burst Assassin 120 Evo is a single tower air cooler that skips the RGB yet again, but this time in favor of an additional 120mm fan, bringing the total to 2. These are in a push-pull configuration. Not only is it different with its fan configuration, but it's got 6 copper heat pipes under a solid cooling block. The cooler's dimensions are 124 by 52 by 156 millimeters, which makes this the tallest cooler thus far. Accessories come in a small bag and are extremely minimal. Instructions are straightforward, but don't include colorful pictures like the other two. It was still easy enough though. The fan blades on this cooler are quite unique. While one has a standard pitch for intake air, the other one has reverse blades to exhaust air out. When installing, you flip the exhaust fan around and attach with the fan frame facing the heatsink. There are rubber corners on these fans for vibration dampening too, just like on the A410 SE. This enables proper airflow and gives a clean design no matter how you look at it. They are both 120mm fans that run at a max speed of 1500 RPM. Currently, the cost of the Burst Assassin 120 is $28.90, and they give you the longest warranty of the group at 6 years. The last cooler in our lineup today is the Arctic Freezer 36 Black. It's got the same single tower heatsink and 2 fans in push-pull configuration, just like the Burst Assassin Evo. The Freezer 36 is back to the 4 direct contact copper heat pipes instead of the 6 found on the Evo. Dimensions are 104 by 126 by 159 millimeters. It's only fitting that the last cooler on the list would be a little bit taller than all the rest. Accessories are extremely slim. It's just one bag with one set of brackets, one set of plastic risers, and 2 different types of screws. Oh, and thermal paste. There's also a T20 driver used to remove Intel's stock retention system so you can install the included contact frame. If you're curious about the retention system on the Freezer 36, I did an entire video on the RGB version of this, and I'll leave it right up here that you can check out later. The fans might be my favorite part of this entire cooler, because Arctic doesn't use the standard metal clip retention system like all the other coolers in this price range. Instead, they use screws and plastic clips that are pre-installed. You just push the fans onto the cooler. These are 120mm fans with a range of 200 to 1800 RPM, and they're identical. You'll know which ones to use for the front and back based on where the screws are located. The price of the Freezer 36 is $28.48, and for that, they give you a 6-year warranty just like the Burst Assassin. I wanted to let you know all of these coolers are fully compatible with AMD's AM4 and AM5 and Intel's LGA 115X, 1200, 1700, and even the new 1851 sockets, if anyone's buying those. Every one of these coolers also came with their own thermal paste, so that's what I used in testing. I wanted to give you the most accurate results as if you purchased one of these and dropped it into your system at home. This is, of course, the area where I'm going to talk about performance. We've got 2 different types of tests, cooling and noise. I also decided to use AMD's Wraith Stealth Cooler, as it's included with my Zen 4 based CPU that I used in today's testing. My test bench is running a Ryzen 5 7600, the non-X version. This is paired with the brand new Asus Tough Gaming X870 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard. The RAM is 32GB of G-Skill's Trident Z Neo running at 6000 MHz. Enabling Expo on my RAM was the only modification I made in BIOS. Everything else is out-of-box settings, so whatever the boost tables are on this motherboard, that's what we got. Oh, also, I'm using the Intel Arc A770 GPU. For cooling performance, I recorded the highest temperature I saw across 3 different workloads for the 5 coolers I used in testing. Of course, I measured idle temp, then I used Unigen Heaven on a 10-minute run to simulate a gaming load, and finally the Blender benchmark for a heavy workload. Right away you can see from the idle temperatures, the Wraith Stealth is not going to perform near as well as some of these aftermarket solutions. With the Wraith Stealth being about 10 degrees warmer at idle than any of the other coolers, I knew that these things were going to outperform it by far. And they did. If you look at the gaming temperatures, we hit 96 degrees Celsius for the Wraith Stealth. The Polar ST4 came in second warmest at 78 degrees Celsius. I didn't really expect too much for a $20 cooler, but I was really impressed seeing the Freezer 36 only hit 57C during the gaming benchmark. Remember, this is a 10-minute benchmarked run, so it's the same settings, the same run every single time. I was pretty impressed with this. The last run is the Blender benchmark for the heavy workload, and you can see again the Wraith Stealth struggles at 96 degrees Celsius. The Frozn A410 hit 80 degrees, which was pretty interesting for this one, considering the Polar ST4 only hit 71. And the Burst Assassin and Freezer 36 were right on its heels at 71 again and 70C. The heavy workload is not really something that most people are going to experience unless you're using your PC for some content creation or editing or something like that, maybe even rendering. If you're going to do 3D printing, you may experience those temps. But even 70 degrees is not terrible for an Zen 4 based CPU. I'll do the best I can to let you see and hear how these things perform at both idle and under full load. Now that you've seen all the performance testing, I want to talk about the DIY experience. How hard were these things to install? How easy were the instructions to read? The packaging, all that stuff. I want to give you a little bit of insight on that. First thing was the Phanteks ST4. I really enjoyed the instructions. It's just a big fold-out sheet, as you can see, and it's got colored pictures that identify the screws that you'll need, where they go. Very easy to read, very well thought out, well designed. In fact, it even shows you how to apply your thermal paste and in what pattern they recommend for their cooler. For the packaging experience, I'm not too thrilled on it. They give you a box and a bag with a bunch more bags inside. So for easy identification, it's nice because the bags are labeled with exactly what screws go to where. So you don't even really need to reference the manual. But as far as trying to save on resources and cut down on baggies and waste and stuff, they're not really that great at it. One thing that's kind of nice and kind of not, depending on what case you go with, is the fan's RGB cable is one of the proprietary Phanteks cables. So if you're going to use a Phanteks case, it's nice because you can plug this directly into the daisy chain connectors on the case's RGB, and it'll integrate all into that. But if you don't want to use a Phanteks case and just use the cooler, then you've got to plug in their adapter. They do give you an adapter for the 3-pin Phanteks connector to split it to a regular 5-volt addressable RGB header, and then you can plug into your motherboard that way. So if you want to go with Phanteks stuff, you can eliminate cable clutter, but if you don't, you have the ability to use it elsewhere. RAM clearance is not an issue at all. This cooler is so thin that it doesn't extend past the socket. This one doesn't even come close, so really nice with that. The biggest downside for the DIY section of this is these fins are razor sharp. It will cut your hand. In fact, it's cutting my hand right now while I'm holding it. And then your clips are just a polished metal look, just shiny steel. They're not black or anything to match the fan. They kind of stand out when you see it. Just kind of something to note is they're not painted. Next one up is the Frozn A410. First thing right away, the installation guide is completely wrong. It's not for this cooler whatsoever, and the AMD installation instructions, the brackets and everything, none of it is the same. If you go over to ID Cooling's website, they have a breakdown that has like a little cutaway for how you install the brackets onto the motherboard for each, for AMD, Intel, all that. That was super useful, so I just kind of stumbled across that, and that's how I installed my cooler. They include a big box with a bag in it, a couple bags actually, for your hardware. It's not like the Phanteks one, it's not a big bag with a bunch of little bags in it. It's just individual bags for the brackets, the Intel bracket, stuff like that. Your thermal paste is in there. For the A410, there is no RGB lighting, but it is simple and functional. It was real easy to install. It's just one cable running to the fan. They've got the rubber pads on here, which were nice. The metal clips, again, are not painted. They're just shiny. It's kind of ugly if you ask me, but you're gonna be looking at the front section here, which is just the black plastic cap, the black fan. It can look clean in almost any build, especially for a cheap price. Again, the single tower, single fan cooler on the Frozn model here doesn't have any RAM clearance issues whatsoever. When it sits on the socket, you are so far back from the RAM that you don't have to worry about any heat sinks. Even if they're big and bulky, it'll be just fine to install it on pretty much any motherboard. Now I'll talk about the Burst Assassin 120. The install instructions are just as easy as everybody else. They were fine to read and everything, even the text. It's got a parts list at the front that shows you a breakdown of the screws that you'll need, but there's no colored pictures like on the Phanteks one. I really liked the Phanteks. For the installation portion, you have to really push down on the cooler itself when you're applying pressure to the screws to get it to start threading onto the mounting hardware in the socket. I kind of sat there and spun for a second, and the spring tension that this thing has is so high that it didn't want to grab the threads, and it was just kind of spinning, but nothing was happening. So when you're applying this, you kind of have to push the pressure down to get it to start locking on to the post. If you're a new builder, you may think that you're breaking it. Don't worry about it. You just have to apply a lot of pressure to get that to engage. They only include one set of mounting brackets for this thing, whether you're using AMD or Intel. That's really nice to not have to fumble and try to see if this bracket goes to Intel, this bracket goes to AMD. You just need to look for the holes to align it with the mounting hardware or mounting location on your motherboard. These fan cables on the Burst Assassin are very short. That's one thing that I want you to keep in mind if you're looking to use this. You have to reorient the fans. I actually snapped them down and everything, and then went to plug in the fans to the motherboard and realized it wouldn't reach my motherboard header. So I had to unsnap them, turn the fan, lengthen the cable then, and re-bolt it on. Just something to keep in mind is pay attention, your cable lengths are a little short. Another really nice thing is, because this is a black version, the black heatsink and the black clips that go to the fans, everything is blacked out. Your cables are black, the heat pipes are black, all of it. It is a really clean design, really beautiful aesthetic. It's nice that they did that, and it's only a couple bucks more than the other coolers, so good on you, ThermalRight. For this one, you also don't need to worry about RAM clearance issues. Even though it's got the double fans and it is 6 heat pipes rather than 4, aligning it on the socket and everything, I didn't see any problems with my RAM heat sinks touching this at all. It doesn't extend past the socket mounts once again. Yeah, really nice for ThermalRight. Good job on the RAM clearance. The last cooler by Arctic is the Freezer 36. Now this one was the easiest to install, and it came with the least amount of parts in the bag. But the instructions are digital, so you will need your cell phone to be able to scan the QR code on the box for the install instructions. This cooler is the widest of the group. In fact, it's even wider than the ThermalRight by a little bit, not by much, but it is. It still doesn't seem to have any problems with RAM clearance issues. Unless you've got some like really fat heat sinks, then maybe they will touch the front of the intake fan there. But I didn't have any issues. Now I only used 2 RAM sticks for mine, and they're on the outermost portion, but it wasn't even close. I absolutely love the snap-on fans. It is so much better than the hook clip system that they've got. You don't have to worry about color matching or anything. I mean, the fans just look like they're floating on here. So the clean design, clean aesthetic, really easy to install. If you've never done a CPU cooler, those clips are a pain, especially when the whole setup is inside your case. To be able to just set this in and push on it and have it snap on, fantastic. That was a ton of information, and it honestly took me a long time to gather it all up. Allow me to summarize this for those of you that skipped right to the end. You know who you are. The best overall performer when it comes to cooling is the Arctic Freezer 36 Black, never going over 70°C in our heavy workload test, and only seeing 57 during gameplay. Any of these coolers are a better option than the Wraith Stealth included with the 7600. Its poor performance and loud noise make it one of the best reasons to spend the extra $20 to $30 on one of these tower coolers. In case you didn't know, as your CPU gets hotter, it'll drop its clock speed to lower temperatures. This directly affects your performance in games, so you'll want to keep that thing cool. When it comes to audio levels, I've got to give it to the ThermalRight Burst Assassin. I think this was the quietest one of the entire group. I'd say the Freezer 36 and Frozn A410 came in tied for second. Now, my audio testing isn't anything scientific, but based on my decibel meter and my calibrated ear, the Burst Assassin takes the win. All of these coolers are within $10 of each other, but you've still got to account for price when considering which one's right for you. The Polar ST4 gets the most points in this category since it comes in right at $20, and it gives you an addressable RGB fan. The last thing to consider is DIY. Who made for the best install experience? The things I considered were packaging, directions, simplicity, and the potential for injury. You know, I gotta look out for your safety. I really liked ID Cooling's little plastic holder for their screws. It made it super easy to find what you need, but they used a lot of extra bags that were kind of unnecessary. In this area, Arctic had the least amount of parts, and all of it was in one bag. I'd call that the most efficient packaging. The best directions go to Phanteks. I really liked the fold-out option with the colored pictures, and it was super easy to follow. Arctic wins again, this time for the simplicity category. There wasn't much to the installation, and the snap-on fans make finishing this thing up a breeze. The safety award goes to the two dual fan coolers. They sort of had a zigzag pattern on the face of each cooler, and they were coated in flat black, which protected my fingers when picking them up. The two single fan coolers were straight uncoated fins and very sharp. So what does that leave us with? If you want the absolute best overall performance, easy install, and near silent operation, the Arctic Freezer 36 is the cooler for you. Even though Arctic wins best overall, I'll be using all of these coolers for some upcoming budget PC builds, because the style and performance is just what I need, especially when they each cost less than $30. I'd suggest every single one of these over AMD's Wraith Stealth. Which cooler do you prefer? Put it down in the comments because I love hearing what you think. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, give it a like or even share it with friends that might need help picking out their next CPU cooler. And if you want more videos just like this, I'll leave them right over here that you can check out next. And as I always say, I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel, and I'll see you in the next one.
Really made an effort, promised I would change, but something stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but something stayed the same.